New Galaxy Broadcasting proudly presents Integrative Hermetic Health with Hugo Rodier, MD. In this program, we explore a powerful new paradigm for health from the standpoint of integrative medicine. In his practice, Dr. Rodier integrates the ancient Hermetic art and the enduring role of food as medicine with modern nutrition, but also allowing for the wide range of important health practices, including truly valuable medical discoveries, chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathic, and herbal medicine. In this program, Hugo Rodier, an expert in intestinal health and nutrition, will help the audience discover an approach that focuses on actual cures, not the masking of the elegant simplicity of many health solutions for the sake of profit. Profit too long has been an overriding motive of the pharmaceutical companies, and sometimes, sadly, by many in the medical establishment today. This is Johnny Bluestar, assisting our host and founder of the Integrative Hermetic Health Show, Dr. Hugo Rodier. Today's show will again be taking a look at some of the newest medical research, some of which challenges some fundamental concepts, for instance, about PSA testing and the value of vitamin D, which our audience may not have caught up with completely. Good morning, Doctor. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Johnny. I'm doing great. Thanks.
So, I see we're going to have a very interesting show today. What shall we start with?
Well, with the general premise that medicine is always progressing, learning. It's a very dynamic, fluid science. And it's good to understand that because some practitioners and the public don't feel that way. So they get into very dogmatic stances, a whole lot of scientists and doctors. And so they think that the state of the art at that precise moment is religion carved in stone. So
that's a good point.
You've noticed that, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. Well, you notice it throughout our whole culture. Exactly. I kind of specialize in geopolitics, and it's the exact same thing. It's like voting on the party line in geopolitics. You're just voting for things that you assimilated somewhere, and they've stuck like cement in your brain.
Right. And so anybody saying otherwise, having anybody who has the courage to say, hey, the emperor's naked and this doesn't sound right, tends to get vilified. And of course, as you say, this is human nature. But I have 3 articles here that kind of illustrate this point.
Okay.
All 3 articles are a bit of a vindication for me, but enough said about that. The first article is about Coumadin. You've heard about Coumadin, right, Johnny? You know, rat poison?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's given as a drug to people to dissolve clots, prevent clots, that sort of thing, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The other name for Coumadin is warfarin. And here's an article in the last issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association. The title is Green Vegetables, Herbs, and Oils May Help Stabilize Patients Taking Warfarin. And if somebody wants to look it up, it's the last issue of the JAMA, page 1128.
Uh-huh.
Wouldn't you know it? It's saying that you can eat a lot of veggies when you're taking Coumadin or warfarin, even some herbs and even some oils. Wait a minute. I thought that herbs, oils, and eating green veggies with Coumadin was totally forbidden. In fact, it was. As a young doctor, I just didn't believe that we should be telling patients to stop eating veggies, particularly leafy veggies, when they were put on Coumadin. So think about it, Johnny. How healthy can a person be who is having clots? Then you put him on a drug to dissolve the clot, which it happens to be rat poison, and then you tell him don't eat veggies ever again. I mean, really, what do you think about that, Johnny? How does that strike you?
I don't know. It strikes me like sort of being in a closed room and they're injecting poisonous gas into that room. But they're going to say it's going to be cool after a while, but you can't take the antidote anymore.
Yeah, I just don't believe people can be healthy without eating veggies. So I did not believe that, even though it was a dictum of the time. I told patients, look, you've got to eat a lot of veggies. Always eat the same amount. And so in my mind, I thought that not eating veggies one day, a little bit the next, and a lot the next, that would create problems. So I reasoned, no, let's just have patients eat the same amount, even weigh them if they want to, be more strict about it. And my patients did just fine. I should say that we don't want to totally vilify this drug, because if you're having clot, yeah, you've got to take potent medicine. Desperate times require desperate measures. So it is indicated. I do tell people to take this drug if their life depends on it, if they're having pulmonary embolisms or clots in their legs. Although I should say that a good diet and blood thinning supplements like omega oils, nattokinase, vitamin E, pycnogenol, vitamin K, all those things help dissolve clots as well. But the point of the story is that now the JAMA is saying, hey, we were wrong. You should eat veggies. In fact, eat a lot of kale, the one that has the most vitamin K, and you'll be fine. And so, yes, of course, common sense prevails. The question then is, again, why is it that we're not more liberal-minded, if you will, when we run across dictums that don't make sense? And you said it very well yourself at the beginning. So here's a great example. I would say anybody listening taking Coumadin or any blood thinner should discuss all these things with their doctors before they make a change in their programming, in their treatment. We don't want to have anyone end up with a clot getting worse. So that's a great article pointing out how science should be open-minded, and at the end, we come up with something closer to the truth. And I should say, Johnny, as we talk about all this, maybe in 10 years, we'll be saying something different. I'm totally open to that, right?
Yeah, we could be using rabbit poison.
Exactly.
But I have a comment on the thing you said before we started to talk about this specific article. Yeah, people are stuck, and I believe that that's based on a certain kind of sociological programming. But there's another problem, and this isn't just true of medical issues, it's true of science in general, which is affected quite often by politics.
Exactly.
And then you have more or less the same thing. It's sort of like what you're saying, where scientists in certain fields become kind of petrified, and they don't, maybe not because they're scared, but because they have also been programmed. And that's another, this kind of refusal to look at fresh data and fresh ideas is another problem, which it's very serious when scientists are infected by it.
Yes, some people call it scientism. In my youth, I called doctors priests in white robes. And nothing against priests, but they can be pretty dogmatic. And a lot of the reason behind all this is the people we're selecting to become doctors, they tend to be memorizers, super memorizers. And that's one thing, to have a tremendous memory. And it's a gift, and I wish I had it. But that's not all you need to be a good doctor, a good scientist. You also need to be open-minded, consider all possibilities, account for all factors, even your own subjectivity. So often the so-called objectivity of science is really camouflaged subjectivity and prejudice, especially to new ideas, new thinkers. Well, let's move on to the other article that proves the point. From the journal Family Practice News, just came out, the last issue, page 25. It's about vitamin D. Vitamin D gets beat up quite a bit. It's so funny to see our societies, and we do it in our own private lives. I call it pendulum thinking. From one end to the other, one extreme to the other. And you're totally right or you're totally wrong. You're either Democrat, you're a Republican. And there's safety in that. Human nature is such that we find comfort in fixed extremes. Then we don't have to worry about the other extreme being right or wrong.
We have psychological safety, but not necessarily environmental or health safety.
Well, short-sighted, the benefits of the moment without considering future repercussions or giving your opponent any respect about his or her ideas when they're totally polarized from yours. But so vitamin D has suffered this, as all vitamins have, I should say, and supplements and food and dictums, etc. So vitamin D used to be the thing to do like 20 years ago. Then everybody after vitamin D, oh no, it's quackery. Now we have an article that says taking vitamin D can help you with ulcerative colitis. Well, 2 points here. One, we've always known that vitamin D is not a vitamin. It's a prohormone, very close to thyroid. So you know it's going to have function throughout the body, and it does. Number two, ulcerative colitis. As you might recall, this is an inflammation of the lining of the intestines. It can be quite serious. A lot of people end up losing huge portions of their intestines. Right. So it's similar to Crohn's disease, if you might recall. And so these poor people are told all the time, I hope it's changing, that diet has nothing to do with it, with the inflammation in the intestines, which just boggles the mind. And so my whole career, I've believed and seen results by having people eat better and by working on the microbiome, which we've talked about many times on the show. And so things are changing. We're recognizing that ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease and irritable bowel syndrome and all those inflammatory conditions of the intestines do respond to diet and supplementation and vitamin D. Vitamin D, as a prohormone, also has anti-inflammatory potential. And so here's article number 2 that shows how we can grow and change in medicine. And hooray for the researchers that have the courage to ask these questions and prove that the dogmas of the time must be questioned.
Were they saying in this, over the past few years, were they more or less saying, well, you get enough vitamin D from the sun? You don't need a supplement?
That's been the dictum. They don't mention that in the article. They say that you ought to aim for a level of over 40. The laboratory tells you you're good if you're between 30 and 100. This article is a bit shy, saying that 40 will do. Anything over 40, well, that's true. But I like to aim for the middle of the scale, 60, 70, as European researchers recommend. So not a bad idea to check your vitamin D levels. You might not be covered for it. And respond to your point, yes, people have believed that just you go out in the sun and you're good, that then you'll trigger the creation of vitamin D in your body with no problem. But we are seeing that is not true. The activation of the solar vitamin D, if you will, happens in the kidneys. And as you know, kidneys have different functional capacity. Some kidneys are really good at converting and creating vitamin D. Others are not so good. I happen to be a poor converter. When I checked my vitamin D levels, I was 15, way below 30. So I need to take vitamin D, particularly in the winter. So I highly recommend that people check their vitamin D levels.
I came up with a phrase to describe what's happening to medicine now. Of course, it may already have been thought of by 10 million other people, but it seems to me it's becoming more like contextual medicine. Because like with the microbiome, you have to actually know what it's like in order to know the bioavailability of certain nutrients or food included, and or drugs. So right there, you have a massive change that's based on individual knowledge that has not really been sought until recently.
That's right. Yeah, speaking of finding articles recently, I did find one last night and didn't have a chance to send it to you, but I'm curious to see your reaction about it.
Okay.
It came out in Medscape thanks to reporter Megan Brooks, and the title is Regret Over Treatment of Prostate Cancer, A Patient's Story. And so it's a very good article. I'm going to post it on my website as a blog, and you're welcome to take a look at it. But basically, it starts with the story of this patient, how a PSA was ordered. Then the PSA came out a little high, so he ended up with a radical prostatectomy, or they took his prostate out. He ended up with side effects, including urinary problems, erection problems, a big mess. And so this patient was really shook up about it. Turns out that 2 years later, the treatment of this condition, what the PSA, elevated PSA, totally changed. And now they're being quite conservative, and they don't go to total radical prostate surgery.
I see. So the interpretation of the data changed as to the efficacy of certain types of treatments. And so this guy was screwed because of that time lapse, you might say.
Right. In fact, now we believe, and it could change, that's a big premise of today's discussion, that PSA screening has not shown any overall survival benefits, meaning it doesn't help. And so what are we doing? No,
Oh my God.
this is really right. So we'll talk about the PSA here in a minute. But
okay, excuse me. Let's talk about it in 2 minutes. We have to take a break now, and we'll be right back, okay?
All right.
This is Johnny Bluestar, CEO of New Galaxy Enterprises, a media content development company. The original productions by Amazon, Hulu, and Netflix in particular has opened up a new and powerful form of television that has both global income and still unexplored profit potential as convergence between offline and online media continues to blossom. We can help persons needing creative help to turn their ideas for television pilots into actionable, marketable scripts. There's probably nothing more exciting in the field of entertainment than these new vistas online, as that capacity crosses more and more to the big screen, and the opportunities for instantaneous online projections of any type of media in that perennially popular venue. To learn more about New Galaxy, see samples of our work, or talk to us about your project, please go to www.newgalaxyenterprises.com and fill out the contact form. Patriots Act is a Brent Marks legal thriller written by Kenneth Eade, a novelist and attorney, often appearing on Threshold Radio. It's about Ahmed, a naturalized U.S. citizen formerly of Iraq, who was sent to Guantanamo Bay detention camp with no real knowledge of a crime he has committed. Brent Marks, a California attorney, is originally hired by Ahmed's wife to fight for his release. The novel opens with a convincing mock execution, a mode of torture meant to break down a prisoner in a brutal and traumatic way that foreshadows Ahmed's actual death in the hands of his accusers.
Ahmed felt the butt of the rifle strike his spine as his knees buckled and he hit the floor.
Move faster, Haji. Up against the wall. Stop there. Good, listen up. My name is Sergeant Brown. You're here because you refused to cooperate in interrogations. The decision has been made to execute you by firing squad.
Wait, I'm an American citizen.
Ahmed felt the black bag rip from his head and for the first time faced his aggressors. He found himself facing a man in camouflage fatigues, holding an M16 to his chest. Beside him, an 8-man firing squad with their rifles in ready position.
I have the right to talk to an attorney. This is all a big mistake.
Brown fastened a leather strap around Ahmed's waist, pinning his spine to a wooden post.
Yeah, a big mistake. You should have cooperated when we asked you about your superiors in Al-Qaeda.
I don't know anyone in Al-Qaeda.
Do you have any last statement, Haji?
But
I repeat, do you have any last statement?
I'm not a terrorist. I'm an American citizen. I've a right to a lawyer and a trial. You've denied me these rights. You will answer to God for your crimes.
I think you can see who has all the rights here. Ready? Aim!
The 8 pointed their rifles at Ahmed. Shivering uncontrollably, Ahmed's knees gave way, and he hung on the post like a man crucified.
Fire!
The deafening explosion of the 8 rifles was the last thing Ahmed heard. He felt the bullets hit his flesh, and his body crumpled forward, hanging lifelessly from the post like a scarecrow.
Today we are going to feature 3 poignant love songs. The first is basically about cosmic love, a very appropriate song for a program called the Integrative Hermetic Health Show. In our show, yes, we talk about modern medicine, but also about the ancient science of Hermeticism, whose symbolism and practice attempts to connect mankind with its divine connection in an enlightened and more benign alliance with a higher source than the frail and flawed human ego. This is who we really are, as described in a song called Love is the Source by Lightstorm.
Tonight, my mind disappears in its plane, alone once again, to simply just be and lose this form and this name. In silence, in a silence, I remain. erases the mind. True silence, inner silence, we will find. Love is the source, the fire that burns. It whirls in the silence that is. Has light, has love, and as bliss. It is my lover's kiss, eternal bliss. Woo! This deep inner silence, this ocean of love embraces us all in the end. We'll all reach the goal, awareness of self, true oneness we will comprehend. With silence, inner silence, as our friend. Love is the source, the fire that burns. It whirls in the silence that is. Has light, as love, and as bliss. It is my lover's kiss, eternal bliss. Yeah.
We're back on the air with the Integrative Hermetic Health Show with Dr. Hugo Rodier, who I'm speaking to right now. We've been discussing things related to the advance of science, and particularly in medicine, the problems that people have in kind of assimilating what they should know as opposed to what they've been programmed to know, and also that sometimes the science radically changes and completely changes the treatment level that patients are exposed to. And we were going to discuss another example of that. Is that correct?
Well, we were talking about this patient that was treated for prostate cancer with a radical prostatectomy. That is, they took out his whole prostate. And then he had a lot of side effects from that. And then the treatment of an elevated PSA has changed since the poor guy went through all that. And this is the story of a friend of mine. When we were young, 30 years ago, he had a slightly elevated PSA of 4. And yeah, it might be a little high for a young guy. It's totally okay for an older man. And he lost his prostate, lost his erections, and then lost his wife.
After surgery, right?
Right. Yeah, he lost his prostate. And so I try to tell him, I said, look, I think this is a little too aggressive. But he was just scared to death because I guess whoever he consulted must have put the fear of God in him, which is totally not the way we handle it now. How do we handle it now? First of all, we don't draw PSAs unless we have a good discussion with the patient about the fact that PSA checking and the digital rectal exam have not shown any survival benefits whatsoever. And so why do?
I think that's a good reason to discuss it with them.
Yeah, exactly. So when you sit with a patient, you should tell them, look, you could check. Yeah, it might lead to this and that, but you could also not check. It's your choice. And it turns out that a lot of people are comfortable with uncertainty. They just don't want to bother. And that's totally a rational way to think about this issue. So if a doctor makes a patient feel like, hey, you got to do it, no, that is totally wrong as of now, as far as the PSA screening goes and the rectal exam. And so I have very few patients who opt to check it. I'll check it. In fact, I'm going to do it next month because I want to know, because I know how to lower the PSA with nutrition and supplements. So I don't see any harm in checking, because if I had a problem, and I tell patients this, if they have an elevated PSA, we can work on it without surgery just by good nutrition and supplementation. And I see the PSA drop. So why not check it? But since a whole lot of patients don't have this choice, that is the nutrition and the supplements, they don't hear that, then all you're looking at, if it's high, is radical intervention, radiation, castration, surgery, etc. And often you end up with hydraulic problems, if you get my drift. So is it worth it? A lot of guys say no. But I should say most of my patients say, yes, let's check it, because I have given them that option, that if it's elevated, we could work on it in a conservative way. So speaking out of both sides of my mouth.
Yeah, a little bit. I guess what you feel is that there's something to the PSA level.
If you're going to work on it in a conservative, nutritional, supplemental way, then patients have that option. Yeah, I think a lot of them will say, okay, let's check. But if another patient in another clinic, the only option that they might be offered, if the PSA is high, surgery, castration, radiation, hormonal therapy, etc., then why do it if you already know you're not going to go through all that if it's high? But again, the control point is to check or not, and patients should know that there has not been any data to show an overall survival benefit from going through this whole procedure. So those are 3 articles that pretty well point out that dictums are bound to change. Even what we're talking about, it's worth repeating, even what we're talking about right now may change.
Well, that's science, isn't it?
Right.
I have a little point to make. This is about one of our discussions last week, where I produced this way of dealing with the problem with the gut-brain addictive connection to my food, where I was having a dialogue about the dangers of eating before I started to eat something. Well, I have to tell you that I was under a lot of stress this last week. I felt really badly about it. Why does this have to happen to me? But I felt tremendous stress, and I started to think about eating ice cream. And I started to try and think of the things that were wrong. I couldn't even think about them. My brain shut it off. Go eat. And I did.
Well, I'm glad that you brought it up. I think people identify with that, and to become really strict about anything and the anxiety it creates, that's not good either. So there's a balance here somewhere, right? So I'm glad that you brought it up. And
I think having things around you that are substitutes for, it was one of my tricks was not just to do that. It was to have, like the pot of vegetables ready, the soup and stew type of thing, and then to have raw salad and different vegetables, maybe dips and things like that. Or maybe even having, like a cashew type of smoothie, cashew milk type of smoothie, and the other things you recommended, like where you basically mash up the frozen bananas, and you put it, you kind of juice it, and it comes out like ice cream. None of that was ready, so I went for other things.
I see.
But if I had those other things, and they were really there, and they were really good enough, I would have done it probably. But that would be my second level of defense. But I couldn't get past that first level. It just disappeared.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think this is tremendously helpful to anyone listening, and it's worth repeating how you can have things ready that you can cope with. It's like nicotine gum, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But it's worth telling patients again that a very, very good thing to have ready is a mix of cashew ice cream with whey ice cream.
Right.
And you pretty much replicate ice cream that way, because ice cream is whey protein with lactose, a sugar. So you still have the whey protein, which is tasteless. But if you throw in the cashew ice cream made from cashews, that's very sweet. You mix the two, freeze it again, and you got something that you cannot distinguish from ice cream. That's my experience. And we all do the same. And it's just, we cannot emphasize enough how psychological eating is. So you just nailed it by saying, when I'm stressed, I reach for the goodies. Yeah, we all do. It's human nature. It's comfort food. In fact, that's why we call it comfort food.
Right.
And we all do it under a tremendous stress. You know, we want someone to throw us a bone. And I've done it too. Fortunately, I don't get stressed out too much. And if I do, there are other ways to cope, etc. But it's very self-aware of you. So that's a huge, huge step in the right direction. Most people are not self-aware, so they don't know how it is that they ended up with eating ice cream. Right?
You know, I just realized, I told you when I was a kid, and I don't know where this brand is now, because in Utah I've never seen it, but the Good Humor Man, I just thought of the name of it, the Good Humor Man, that was the ice cream truck. That was the brand. That's amazing. Oh, yeah. I never even noticed it, even in our last discussions about ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, we're all programmed. You hear those bells coming down the road, and everybody running out of their houses.
In a good humor.
Remember, Dad. Yeah.
They're all, my God, just thinking about it.
Yeah, there you go. See, very good.
I'm sorry, Doctor. We're going to have to take a break now. We'll be right back.
Okay.
My company, New Galaxy Enterprises, is a California corporation specializing in the creation of media and promotional content. We are focused on original, innovative projects that are good for humanity. These projects could be nonfiction books or novels, fictional screenplays or documentary content, websites and website content, commercial advertising content for print, audio, or video products on the internet, television, or radio, musical scores for advertising, television, or film, video, audio editing, etc. We want to promote products and projects that support the environment, encourage a healthy experience in living, developing, nurturing, and useful technology, and offering platforms for positive, socially constructive entertainment or informative, transformative media. Our experience in creating a variety of products like this is rather vast, and we offer client-based and collaborative products, as well as the opportunity of active investors to join us in the creation and promotion of proprietary products, some of which are in latter stages of development. For more information, go to www.newgalaxyenterprises.com. That's www.newgalaxyenterprises.com. If you're interested in talking to us, just fill out the contact sheet and we will get back with you. If you're not fond of books, you may be interested in watching Dr. Rodier's slide presentation on his website, hugorodier.com. That's HUGORODIER.com. It lasts 48 minutes and explains the simple roots of all diseases with pictures and graphs that are easy to understand. The presentation includes basic principles of physics, philosophy, anthropology, and history to truly integrate the most vital pillars of human health. Our next song following today's musical agenda featuring love songs is called My Heart Is Ready. This song tells a deep, overpowering story of love and reconciliation. And reconciliation is something that people of our world really need. It is a song by the amazing Patricia Welch with music composed and performed by Edgar Ahrens. I was honored to be able to write the lyrics.
The moon hangs low in the sky. I'm back again on this path. I scatter petals along My heart's ready for you. Can we say on that? I can't believe it was you. I heard you knock at my door. How could you come to believe this frozen heart could thaw? Can fear melt in moonlight? Heartbreak's trusty old friend. My heart's ready for you. A love to defend. All the hopes which were crushed, buried in great defeat, blossoming to the light below dancing feet. Blossoming to the light below dancing
We're back on the Integrative Hermetic Health Show with Dr. Rodier, and we're discussing a wide variety of really important things. We have been discussing the nature of science and health and the changes that take place. And we've discussed a lot how a lot of this has to do with new information about the microbiome. And now we're going to get into some more articles with some really interesting facets. Doctor, why don't you talk about the next article?
It's an article that came out in the journal Mayo Clinic Proceedings about celiac disease. And you're familiar with that, right, Johnny?
My sister, I don't know much about it, but my sister had it or has it.
Well, it's basically a fulminant allergy to gluten, which we find in wheat and rye, those grains. And so people can become very sensitized to it. So gluten then becomes a very inflammatory molecule. So you end up with really inflamed intestinal walls. And this can lead to a lot of problems, from bleeding and a lot of gut dysfunction, but also to immunological problems. Gluten can also go throughout the body. Remember that our microbiome is the immune system, most of it, 2/3. So by having that irritating molecule in the intestines, you start to have autoimmune problems, a whole lot of them, arthritis, lupus, brain problems. In fact, Perlmutter wrote a book about this wheat brain, or was it grain brain? Grain brain. And so this inflammation that starts in the gut because of gluten, that inflammation can escape the gut, leaky gut and all that. And that inflammation can go throughout the body, creating all kinds of problems. And they all started from a gluten allergy. And so that's a basic problem, okay? And so this article is saying that people who live with a person with celiac disease can start to have the same symptoms. Yeah, how about that? So this is first-degree relatives, so people who are living in the same household, right? So what's your impression? Why do you think this might be happening?
Because they're eating the same food, and the food is causing that?
Yeah, but guess what? They're also sharing the same microbiome. That's what happens when you live with someone. You start to share the same microbes by touching, by kissing, by having sex, et cetera, et cetera.
Really?
Well, yeah, that's what the article is about. So it's two ways, So you're right. They're eating the same foods. but at the same time, they're sharing the same microbiome. So now I'm not saying for everybody living with a celiac patient to panic, but it would be prudent to get checked, especially if you're starting to have early symptoms of gluten allergy and they start with gut symptoms. So I would get checked. The only problem with checking for a gluten allergy is that it's not very reliable. The blood test, the biopsy test can fail. So I wouldn't take that for an answer. What I would get for a definite answer is either a PCR test or a DNA test of your gut bacteria, and through DNA, testing of the stool, or an elimination diet, the poor man's way. So yeah, I mean, that's the gold standard right there. Say you're having all kinds of symptoms, you live with someone who's been diagnosed, and you start to have subtle gut issues. Well, get off the wheat and the rye for a good month, and then put it back in 1 grain at a time, and say your symptoms come back. Well, that's pretty obvious, right? So that's the poor man's way of doing it.
Well, I have some questions here. First of all, my sister was diagnosed when she was a child, and that was quite some time ago. And would gluten have? She was given a diet, but was gluten a concern there?
Back then?
Yeah.
Way back then, I have to say we were not that aware of this problem. So I'm not sure how they treated her then.
It was a diet, but the word gluten never came into it. I don't even know if wheat products came into it. I remember it was a serious attempt to control her diet, but I don't remember what. But then the other question I have is, when did this incredibly widespread gluten concern come up? And is it truly justified in terms of the numbers?
Great points. Since when we became aware of this problem, it's always been there, but it really took off like 10, 15 years ago, right? Remember we talked about pendulum swinging?
Yeah,
so
sure.
It went too far the other way, and then we had a movement, a fad diet where everybody was getting off gluten. And that was totally overdone, unwarranted, unnecessary, and boring. And so, yeah, I blogged about that. I mean, to look into it, it's one thing, but to all of a sudden not eat any grains at all or any gluten at all, even though you're not having any symptoms. And then the marketing became ferocious.
We're talking about millions and millions of dollars devoted to separating products.
That was totally overdone, in my opinion. Yeah. So the pendulum is swinging back a little bit where, of course, all these fanatics that bought into it, after a while, predictably, they became bored. So you don't hear about it anymore because, look, grains are it's a very social thing to do. Most of our fun food when we hang out is grains. And I say go for it. Unless you have a proven gluten allergy, I say eat grains in moderation. I tell my patients, eat grains for fun and variety. Don't fill up with them, But to totally get rid of grains, that doesn't make any sense at all, particularly when our entire cultures, societies, are based on grain, the staff of life.
Yeah, and also other cultures are really into, like rice, and it's just an absolute staple of their diet.
Exactly. And guess what we eat more of when we get off grains? Processed sugars and meat, both of which, in my opinion, are worse. And so that is why I don't lightly say, get off grains or get off gluten. Just do an elimination diet, check that DNA test of the stool, check the other tests, a biopsy, if they're doing a colonoscopy or a blood test, but the latter two are not as reliable. So, yeah, it's a great point you make bringing that up, because this whole grain thing, or gluten thing, was overdone for a while. We don't hear about it much more because people got bored refraining from gluten.
Well, I have another question.
Sure.
I'm pretty sure the phrase I'm going to say is correct, but I might be wrong. There's something called refeeding, and that refers to you go on a diet, and after a while, it could be a couple of weeks, it could be a couple of days. I don't know the timetable. I think it may be contextual. And then the person pigs out. And then they feel good. They may start to lose a little bit of weight. And then they go back in their more strict diet. I mean, I've noticed that if I'm on a strict diet and then I pig out a little bit, maybe on ice cream or something else, I sometimes feel energized and good. But if I continue on that path, I start having toxic reactions. But is it good? Is it possible that putting a little bit of extra sugar and stuff and spiking some insulin and so forth once in a while has a virtuous effect?
No, I don't believe that. People also call it taking holidays, and I don't believe in it. I've never seen it work. It's like telling an alcoholic, oh, you can drink once in a while. Look, you can get away with it if you have a personality that's not an addicting personality. And so you can go to a party and you don't want to offend the host and you do take a little nibble of the pizza. Yeah, that's fine. But if you have any tendency to become addicted to something, pretty soon that weekly thing you're doing, the free day, the holiday, the pigging out, becomes a daily thing. Okay. And so that's what I've seen in people. So I don't recommend it. I do have to say, and we've quoted this article that came out in The Lancet like 30 years ago, saying that people who eat candy twice a month live longer. But I think it has nothing to do with the food itself, but the attitude of the person. That free attitude where you're not Nazi about these things and you don't fall apart because you might have had a bad day because of social pressure or stress. It's more about the psychological makeup of that person. Further, the other point that should be made, which is beautifully made by the next article from the Journal of Nutrition, is that our gut bacteria is shaped by the food we eat. So if you constantly, or not constantly, if you once in a while pig out on those sugary foods, ice cream and all that, you're keeping the bacteria that craves the food alive. And that's why you feel so good when you eat it, because those comatose bacteria, you had them on the ropes there for a while. So to get a second wind, you rescue them from sure death, if you will, by refeeding them. You had them on the retreat, and here you go. You rescue them again, throw them a bone again, throw them a little more sugar, more ice cream. They come back, and you feel great.
But doesn't the existence of those bacteria and their activities sometimes actually strengthen the immune system?
Very good point. Yes, I tell my patients that all the time. In fact, we've seen that with parasites. People who have parasites seem to be healthier. Think of that grain of sand inside an oyster. It creates a reaction where you get a pearl. So yes, think of it as a hygiene hypothesis, Will says, as a way to sort of keep the immune system on alert and on its toes.
In dealing with the Wim Hof system, which I've talked about, where you intentionally experience cold, unpleasant cold, and then after a while you begin to be able to deal with the environment differently. You begin to be able to deal with extreme cold, but also there are certain effects that may affect the level of inflammation that you have in your body, the pH in your body, and so forth. But the idea is there's something they call the wedge, and the wedge is going against the normal comfort zone of the environment, which is what I'm really kind of talking about here. You're in a clean environment, but it's so clean that maybe if something comes up, it's not really good. So maybe nature equips you with almost the need to go against that wedge once in a while.
Well, welcome to Hermetic Medicine.
Yay! I finally did it.
This is what the show is all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those trees fighting in the forest, they keep growing up and up and up because they're all struggling to get to the top and get more solar rays. Yeah, this is a struggle that makes us better people. That's why people who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth don't do as well, because they don't struggle. And so this is what the ancients have known forever and have told us about adversity and suffering as being vehicles for improvement. And every avatar has told us the same, as above, so below. And so the hygiene hypothesis is about that, how we get primed to fight better. So the point here is not that it's bad to have bad bacteria and parasites in the gut. They're always there. They're part of the human condition. But that you need to fight them, as you well say, and you do that with good food to strengthen the good bacteria to keep the bad guys under check. And so if you start eating poorly, the good guys are not as strong. The bad guys that are always there will break through, gain the upper hand, and create all the problems we're talking about. And so, yeah, very good, Johnny, because this is hermetic health. This is what we talk about, and relating all these issues to the very ancient wisdom, the mind and the body connection, how our psychological well-being totally tied to our physical well-being. And again, it's worth repeating the hygiene hypotheses. You know, you always see parents freaking out when a kid picks up something off the ground and eats it, or when a dog licks the baby's face, or we shouldn't have animals in the house, and let's scrub everything real well. These people don't do as well. The hygiene hypothesis tells you that the more exposed you are to triggers in the environment to keep your immune system on its toes, those people do better.
Well, that's really interesting. Well, you take care, Doctor, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thank you, Johnny.
The Coalition is a unique project designed to empower its members both individually and collectively. Besides individual empowerment, its broader focus is on the restoration, protection, and enhancement of citizen and human rights throughout the world through the aid of its members. As this project is centered in the United States, our first task is to create a website and social network infrastructure to promote collective efforts to take back our rightful control as citizens over our government as designed by our founding fathers. Although we must begin with the social network restricted to United States citizens, the organization will also host a global dialogue for the discussion of human rights by citizens of democratic nations throughout the world. If you're interested, please check us out in the GoFundMe.com website, entering in the search field the Coalition for Planetary Empowerment. That is, go to GoFundMe.com and enter in the search field the Coalition for Planetary Empowerment. For more information about Dr. Rodier's practice, books, blogs, and newsletters, contact Hugo Rodier, MD, at www.hugorodier.com. That's HUGORODIER.com. Patty Greer is known for her tremendous work in filming crop circles, but she's also known for her both far-reaching spiritual music as well as beautiful, sensitive songs addressing the deepest needs and passions of humans needing love and understanding. We go out with her song, Love Heals Everything.
Do a kickstart, yeah.
gonna have to break that lock and turn